2026 will be Scotland's 9th appearance at the FIFA World Cup. Whilst we will, of course, be hoping to progress past the group stage for the first time in a major tournament, I think it's worth looking through our previous efforts on the world stage to see how close, or far, we have come to achieving that feat. Despite being the second oldest football association and having some of the best teams in early international football, Scotland were not a member of FIFA between 1928 and 1946. This meant they were unable to take part in the 1930, 34 and 38 World Cups, with their first opportunity being the 1950 World Cup, which they qualified for by finishing second in the Home Nations tournament. But because they finished second, the SFA didn't view it as being sporting to travel to Brazil as they hadn't won the tournament. This meant that Scotland's first World Cup appearance would be the 1954 tournament in Switzerland. Despite being in a group of 4, teams would only play twice in the group stages. This was because the format made it so 2 teams would be seeded and 2 unseeded, with it being 2 games between a seeded and unseeded side. Scotland were unseeded, which was unfortunate as they would be in the same group as the 1950 winners Uruguay. Their first game, however, would be against the other seeded side, Austria. Scotland would lose this game 1-0 thanks to a first half goal from Eric Probst, which all but guaranteed their elimination before coming up against Uruguay. If there was any hope going into the game against the defending champions, it was very quickly diminished as despite it being 2-0 at half time, Carlos Borges would finish with a hat-trick, whilst Oscar Miguez and Julio Abade scoring a brace each, as Uruguay would won out 7-0 winners, a game that still stands as Scotland's record defeat, and would mean Scotland finished bottom behind Czechoslovakia on goal difference. Both Austria and Uruguay would go on to be knocked out in the semi-finals after some interesting results to say the least. Austria would defeat host Switzerland 7-5 after being 3-0 down in 20 minutes, before losing 6-1 to eventual winners West Germany, with Uruguay beating England 4-2, with the South Americans being on the receiving end of the same scoreline at the hands of Hungary after extra time. 4 years later, and Scotland would make the trip over to Sweden for the 1958 World Cup. This time the groups were not divided into any kind of seeding system and would see us play 3 games instead of 2. This time around, Scotland's opponents would not include the defending champions, but they would face France, Yugoslavia and Paraguay. Scotland would open with Yugoslavia, where, after a 6-minute opener from Alexander Petkovic, the 49th minute would see Hearts winger James Murray score an equaliser, with it being Scotland's first goal at a World Cup. That game would finish 1-1, which also meant it was Scotland's first point at the tournament. This would be followed up by a game against Paraguay, the first and so far only game between the two nations. Paraguay would take the lead in the 4th minute through Juan Bautista Aguero Sanchez, which is the most South American footballer name I have ever seen, before John Moody would equalise 20 minutes later. Cayetel Rey, however, would give Paraguay the lead again just before half-time, with Silvio Parodi making it 3-1 in the 73rd minute. Robert Collins would get a goal back a minute later, but no equaliser would come, with Scotland now needing a win against France to have any hope of qualifying. France had beaten Paraguay 7-3 in their opening game, but had just been defeated 3-2 by Yugoslavia, so a win wasn't impossible. France, however, would take the lead in the 22nd minute through Real Madrid striker Raymond Kopa, with Jules Fontaine getting a second just before half-time. While Stuart Baird would get a goal back for Scotland, it wasn't to be, and Scotland would yet again finish bottom of their group. After back-to-back tournaments, it would take another 16 years for Scotland to qualify, with the 1974 tournament in West Germany seeing their return. Scotland would once again be put in a group with Yugoslavia, while South American giants would join in, along with, to the best of my knowledge, Scotland's first African opponents in Zaire. Scotland would open against Zaire and would see Peter Lorimer open the scoring in the 26th minute, with Joe Jordan getting a second in the 34th minute to give Scotland their first ever victory in a World Cup fixture. Next up, however, would be Brazil, a side that included Jairzinho, but a brilliant display from both goalkeepers would see the game finish 0-0. This, however, meant qualification for the next round was fully dependent on bettering Brazil's result as goal difference would come into play. While Brazil had drawn both games 0-0, Yugoslavia managed to thump Zaire 9-0, and in an era where it was 2 points for a win, it meant that the two sides were going into the game on 3 points, with Brazil on 2, and with an almost guaranteed win. That would be the case, as Brazil would run out 3-0 winners in a game against Zaire that is better known for Mwapu Alenga punting the ball away from a Brazilian free kick in what was an act of protest against the nation's dictator Mobutu Sese Seko. Yugoslavia would take the lead, however, in the 81st minute through Stanislav Karasai, but Joe Jordan would get an equaliser in the 88th minute to regain hope for qualification. Yet again, however, it wasn't enough, with Scotland finishing third, behind Brazil on goal difference by a single goal. One more in any of the 3 games would have seen Scotland qualify. The 1978 edition in Argentina would see Scotland placed in a group with the Netherlands, Peru, and brand new opponents in Iran. Scotland would initially get off to a good start in their opening match against Peru, with Joe Jordan scoring in the 14th minute to give them the lead, but goals from Cesar Cueto and Juan Cabillas would see Peru run out 3-1 winners. The next game against Iran would see Scotland take the lead again, this time through an own goal from Andranik Eskandarian, but yet again, Scotland would fail to hold on to the lead, with Iraj Danai Farid equalising for Iran in the 60th minute. With the match finishing 1-0, again, a result that meant Scotland were going into their final game needing a big win or results to go their way if they were to go through. Unfortunately, this was against the Total Football Dutch side that had just lost in the Euros final 2 years prior. Thankfully for Scotland, there was no Johan Cruyff due to a kidnapping attempt in Barcelona, but this was still an impressive Dutch side with players such as Jan Wimmer, Ruud Krol, Jan Jogboyd and more. Unlike the previous 2 games, it would be Scotland going a goal behind, with Peter Reizenbrink opening for the Dutch with a penalty in the 34th minute. In a similar manner to the other games though, it would be Scotland's turn to make a comeback, with Kenny Dalglish equalising just before half-time, before Archie Gemmill would give the Scots the lead from the penalty spot. This would be followed up by Gemmill scoring that goal to make it 3-1 in the 68th minute, and as it stood, Scotland needed one more goal to qualify for the next round. John Rep would score for the Dutch in the 71st minute, Scotland would finish third on goal difference, while the Dutch would go on to the final where they were defeated by Argentina in totally legitimate circumstances. 1982 would see Scotland take a trip to Spain, where they would meet old foes Brazil, alongside the Soviet Union and another new opponent in New Zealand. It would be our new opponents in New Zealand we would face first, and unlike in rugby, it would be Scotland getting the big win, with a convincing 5-2 victory, with goals from Kenny Dalglish, John Wark, John Robertson and Steve Archibald. Next up then was Brazil, and considering the last time they played in the World Cup it finished 0-0, maybe Scotland could do something similar. Well, it started off great, with David Nery opening in the 18th minute. Maybe this was it. Scotland were going to go all the way now. It's time to believe. Brazil would win 4-1, with goals from Zico, Oscar, Eder and Falcao wiping out any positives from the New Zealand game. This meant that once again, Scotland went into the final group game needing a win to progress. In their final game then, Scotland would take on the Soviet Union in a game dubbed Communism vs Alcoholism. Joe Jordan would give Scotland the lead in the 15th minute, but the Soviets would not have this, however, as the second half would see Shevardze and Sengelia score to give them the lead, with Graham Souness scoring a late equaliser to see the game end in a draw, and for the second year running, Scotland were knocked out on goal difference. 1986 in Mexico saw a format change that would bring great hope to Scotland. 4 of the 6 best third place teams would qualify out of the group stage. This hope was quickly diminished when Scotland were put into a group with Denmark's golden generation, West Germany and Uruguay. Scotland's opener would come up against the Danes, who would score the only goal through Preben Elkjær in the 57th minute. Up next would be West Germany, who had a side containing Lothar Matthäus, Rudi Völler and Karl-Heinz Rummenigge, but Gordon Strachan would score the opener in the 18th minute to give Scotland a shock early lead. West Germany's quality, however, would come through with goals from Rudi Völler and Klaus Allofs, seeing Scotland fall to a 2-1 defeat. Whilst being defeated in both games was bad, it wasn't the end of the world. As mentioned, the 4 best third place teams would go through, and Scotland still had a chance thanks to their goal difference. They would come up against a Uruguay side who, despite drawing 1-1 with West Germany, had just been beaten 6-1 by the Danes, meaning that for the 5th tournament in a row, Scotland needed to win the final game to qualify. After Jose Batista set a new record for quickest World Cup red card after just 56 seconds for a tackle on Gordon Strachan, Scotland would fail to take advantage, with Fernando Alves' goal line save being enough for Uruguay to hold on for a 0-0 draw to see them through, and for Scotland to once again get sent home at the group stage. 1990 would see Scotland travel to Italy, where this time there was no second group stage, but there was still qualification for those who were the best third place finishers. Scotland would be put in a group with World Cup debutants and new opponents Costa Rica, Sweden, and, once again, Brazil. Scotland would open with a game against a team many predicted to finish bottom, Costa Rica. Juan Cayasso would score the only goal to give Costa Rica a 1-0 win in their World Cup debut. Again, not an ideal start, but up next would be Sweden, where Scotland would take an early lead through Andrew McCall before Mo Johnson would double the lead in the 81st minute. And while Sweden would get a goal back 5 minutes later through Glenn Stromberg, Scotland would hold out for the win, meaning that once again they would need a win in their final group game to have any hope of qualifying. Against Brazil. As was probably to be expected though, Brazil would get a 1-0 win after Muller would take advantage of a defensive mishap, which confirmed Scotland to finish third, but as the worst of the six. Even a draw would have ended up being enough, but this is Scotland and we're not allowed to escape the groups. After missing out on a trip to America in 1994, Scotland would return to the World Cup in France for 1998. Unlike the prior two World Cups they competed in, there would be no progression for any third place sides, and this would be the first World Cup that Scotland were a part of that awarded 3 points for a win rather than 2. Scotland would again face brand new opposition in Morocco, with some familiar opposition in Norway and Brazil.
Leave me alone!
Scotland would open this tournament with a game against their old foes, and in what was the opening game of the entire tournament, Cesar Sampaio would score in the 5th minute. But John Collins would score the equaliser from the penalty spot to bring it level going into half time. Could this be the game we finally get a result against the Brazilians? An own goal from Tom Boyd in the 74th minute would end those hopes, with Brazil going on to win 2-1. Next up would be Norway, who had a few recognisable names such as Tor André Flo and Ståle Solbakken, but it would be Havard Flo who would open the scoring early in the second half, but Craig Burley would score an equaliser in the 66th minute. Scotland, however, would not get a winner, meaning once again,
say the line, Bart!
Scotland needed a win to have any hope of qualifying from the group. Morocco had managed a draw against Norway, but a 3-0 defeat to Brazil meant they were also on 1 point and were in the same boat and hoping a win would get them through. I don't think I need to tell you what happened here. Morocco would won out 3-0 winners, meaning Scotland would finish bottom of the group. I guess a win for either side didn't matter anyway, as Norway managed to beat Brazil. So, how does this bode for the 2026 World Cup then? Well, we have a new first-time opponent in Haiti. Our record against first-time opponents is 2 wins, 2 draws and 4 losses, but Haiti are ranked 83rd in the world and we really should be winning that game. Unfortunately, we have a rematch against Morocco, who are ranked 7th in the world, and then another game against Brazil, who are 6th in the world. Due to this, we should be looking to rack up as big a victory as possible against Haiti, as 8 of the best 12 third place teams will qualify. But looking through the records, we're going to find a way to finish 9th in that table. Of course, the big wins against Curacao and Bolivia have lifted spirits, so maybe, just maybe, this year is the year we finally get out of the group stage of a major tournament. That's all for this video, and of course I hope you enjoyed, unless you remember these tournaments and are traumatised by them, in which case I can only apologise. How do you think Scotland's 2026 campaign will go? Will we finally get out of the group? Let us know in the comments below. Channel memberships are available in the description. Those who have signed up have their names on screen now. Liking, sharing and subscribing are all appreciated, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.